We bought a house in France, and I'm going to talk you through every step of the process as we're going through it. As a disclaimer, this is not real estate, legal, or tax advice. I am not an expert in any of those fields. This is just our process as we're going through it and as I understand it so far. So if the process of purchasing a house in France is interesting to you, I also post tours of the houses we've seen, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a video. And don't mind me, but I'm going to be referencing my notes during this video because there's some technical and date specific stuff that I want to make sure I get as right as possible. So to start off with, there's actually a couple things about our house that I don't think I've shared yet. The first of which is that I actually only found the listing for it on April 11th, which was after I made my video about our plans for property hunting in France that had that whole Excel spreadsheet with the houses we were hoping to see. And I actually only found it 3 days before we left for France. Also, I almost canceled the viewing for this house because it was the only one we saw in this region and because the listing photos, I feel, didn't really do the house justice. So when I saw them, I was like, I could take it or leave it. And luckily I didn't because obviously it turned out to be really great. The other thing that's kind of funny about this house is not only did I almost cancel the viewing, but I ended up showing up to the viewing 30 minutes late because I had remembered the time wrong in my mind. And finally, I don't think I've shared this fact, but the house is in the Dordogne region, which is actually further north and further from the seaside than we had originally planned to purchase, which is surprising. So you never know what is going to work out for you. So try and remain open. Ironically, it's also almost the same price as a house we saw in 2023 that we really liked but couldn't afford at the time because we weren't able to qualify for a mortgage then. Okay, so let's get into some of the details about the process, which I understand a little bit better now after having another conversation with somebody who works in our real estate agent's office, and she talked us through the whole process as we can expect it from now moving forward. A little backtracking, we made the verbal offer for the house on May 5th, and we did this because we knew there were 3 other viewings for the house that week, and we didn't want it to get scooped out from underneath us. What I've since learned is that the house had only been on the market for 4 weeks, so it didn't stay on the market for very long, which to us shows that it is a viable property. There are other houses we looked at that had been on the market for months, if not over a year. So like I said, we made this offer on May 5th, and then the owners accepted the verbal offer on the same day. And then on May 7th, we signed the letter of intent, and the owners countersigned it on May 9th. At this point, our real estate agent started putting together the documents that we need for the compromis de vente, which is the sort of initial sale agreement, and this is usually ready within 6 weeks of signing that letter of intent. So we're expecting to have the compromis de vente ready to sign sometime in the next week or so. Part of what goes into drafting this compromis is whether any furniture will be included in the sale, since the value of the furniture is subtracted from the price of the house. And this impacts how much we pay in notary fees. And luckily for us, the owners are leaving a fair amount of furniture, so this will lower our notary fees. Once we have that compromis de vente and we sign it, we will receive a registered letter the next day that formally acknowledges the signing of that document and gives us the information we need to transfer the funds to the notary's bank accounts. And this is the 10% deposit that we need to put down. And we have 2 weeks to do that from when we sign the compromis de vente. Also, from when we sign the compromis de vente, we have a 10-day cooling off period, which means that we can back out of the sale without any penalty for any reason, but the sellers cannot back out of the sale. Now, in terms of paying that 10% deposit, we've decided to go with a currency exchange company to help us convert the Canadian dollars into euros. And it's going to cost us a couple thousand more than it would have cost us to use an online currency exchange service like Wise. But part of why we chose to do this is because what you're paying for with the currency exchange company is a customer service rep who helps walk you through any issues. And with Wise, you do not have a customer service rep. And I felt a little bit too nervous to transfer such a large sum of money without having access to somebody who could help us if any issues would come up. And with Wise, they have to do some checks with additional documentation to make sure that the funds are coming from a reputable source. And we have the documentation to prove that, but it would worry me that for whatever reason, they would need additional documentation and wouldn't let us know, and we wouldn't get the money where it needs to be on time. So we've chosen to go with this currency exchange company. And at this point, we've actually already purchased the euro for the deposit on the home, and that was at an exchange rate that valued the Canadian dollar at just under 64 centimes of euro. So one other thing that the currency exchange company offers is that it can lock in a rate for you. So for instance, we haven't figured out when or how we're going to transfer the remainder of the down payment yet, but one option is that the currency exchange company can lock us in at today's best exchange rate, and they can lock that in for a certain period of time. So if we want to lock that in today, we're committed to transferring that money with them at whatever the best rate is today, if that's 64 cents. And so in 3 months' time, if that's actually gone down to 62, we benefit. Mind you, if it's gone up to like 67, that means we're not getting as much as we could for our money. So you have to weigh the like potential benefit with the potential risks. Another thing they can do is also track a specific exchange rate for you. So if we want to say like hold on to our money and buy it when it hits 65 cents to the Canadian dollar, then we can do that. But there's the chance that it will never hit 65 cents. So that's one thing we're still figuring out right now, whether to lock in. And it's going to make a big difference because we're talking about tens of thousands of euros here. Also, once we've signed the compromis de vente, the mortgage brokers we're working with can then start shopping around at the separate banks to see who might give us a loan. And in the meantime, as the notary and our real estate agency has been putting together the compromis de vente, the mortgage company has been collecting various documentation from us so that once the compromis de vente is signed, we send them a copy and they're able to go out and start securing that mortgage for us. So my understanding so far is that there's a clause built into the compromis de vente that gives you 60 days to secure a mortgage if you're a French person, and for foreigners it's actually 90 days because it usually takes longer. And while the mortgage broker is working on finding us a loan, the notary will be doing all the necessary legal checks to make sure there aren't any claims or loans against the property that would prohibit its sale to us. This process for the notary usually takes about 9 to 10 weeks, and it's going to be happening over the summer, which means that there's a chance it'll take a little bit longer because, as you know, most of France shuts down for August. So even though I don't think our notary is taking a vacation, the people that she might need to be in contact with may very well take a vacation, and the same thing goes for the bank. So we're not really expecting for this whole process to be over until September. Then about a week before finalizing the sale, the notary is going to send us the final sale contract, which is called the acte de vente. And this document will tell us how much we have remaining to pay on the down payment after the deposit, and also how much we have remaining to pay the notary, because when you put down the deposit, you also put down some initial notary fees so that they can start doing their work. And a few days before the final sale, you do one last walkthrough on the property to make sure that everything is in order and as you expected it to be based on how you had seen the property when you agreed to purchase it. This walkthrough is also where you take note of the meters for the utilities so that you can transfer them all over into your name. And this is something that you do right away once you take possession, and you might have to be in person to sign some of these contracts, so just something to note. Some agents actually help with this, but it's not technically part of their job, so there are also third-party companies that do this, which might be useful because not all of these companies, the water, electrical, etc., have English-speaking lines if you don't speak French. Also, before closing, we need to have proof that we have house insurance, so that's something we're going to start looking into shortly. But my understanding from our agency is that actually house insurance is cheaper in France than in Canada, so we're looking at maybe 250 euro a year, but this depends on your particular circumstances, where your house is, how big it is, whether you're renting it out or not, etc., etc. There are also a couple other things we'll have to sort out by this point, including opening a French bank account from which our mortgage will be paid, and probably the bank that gives us the loan And probably the bank that gives us the loan for the mortgage will want us to have this bank account with their bank. We're also going to need to find an accountant to help us get set up for paying taxes as non-French residents, and also for dealing with the rental income taxes. And finally, we're going to have to set up some sort of inheritance contract for the property, because French inheritance law is kind of complicated, but apparently that's something that our notary can help us with right before closing. So that's where we are right now. That's a lot to digest, and there have already been a lot of learnings on our part since the last time I spoke with you. Hopefully we won't have any issues getting a mortgage, but because that process takes so long, and because part of that is going to happen over the month of August, like I said, we won't probably have the house until September at the earliest. In the meantime, I'll keep posting semi-regular updates about that process as it happens, to take you along with me through the process of purchasing a house in France. I hope you found this little bit of information helpful, and feel free to leave me any questions in the comment box about this process. I will answer to the best of my ability with what I know about what we've been going through so far, but please remember that that might be very different for your experience. Thanks for watching, and I hope you keep allowing yourself to dream big and take action to make those dreams a reality. See you next time.